And we welcome you back to the WHTC Morning News for this Tuesday, June 30th. Tuesday mornings, we have a chance to talk about some things going on in Washington with U.S. House Representative Fred Upton of St. Joseph, represents Allegan County in the lower chamber. Lower because of just because there's more people in it than the other. But Fred's on the other side of our Zoom connections. Fred, good morning. Hope all is well with you and the family.
Well, good morning. It is. It is.
I know we got some resentment in the back. The old term, upper chamber, lower chamber. Hey, wait a minute. We in the House, we're not lower by anything.
Well, we sometimes refer to the Senate as the lower body, just to get their chain a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's just a little good-natured stuff, but certainly some concerns about COVID-19. More states may be turning the dial back up. Michigan might be among them. We'll know more in about 7 hours from when we have our conversation. But you've been obviously among those that have been concerned about trying to address the situation with vaccines, with inoculations, with treatments. And so far, so far, so good. It's going to be taking a while, but it looks as if science is trying to get a handle on all this.
Well, we really have to see that, and that's why it's so important. And from the start, I've encouraged folks to wear masks. I supported the governor's move to require masks in retail establishments, in particular, not only to protect those employees that work there, but also to protect the patrons that may be, whether it's a grocery store, the post office, or the bagel shop, or whatever it is. So we need to do that. And we also saw a study just last week that some were predicting that if everyone wore a mask, we'd save 35,000 Americans by October 1st that otherwise may pass away. So that's number one. And number two, we need to continue to develop on the testing side. As you know, been very active. The president signed legislation that I supported with nearly $2 billion more for testing from the private sector. And it just happens now that we have a Michigan company. I've highlighted this in my kitchen table report, but we've got a Michigan company, and they came back to me about a week ago and said they passed all the hurdles. The FDA, the NIH say that it really does work, and now they have to prove that they can manufacture it and market it. I think that's going to be the easy part of the solution, but literally there'll be a device that for under $10, one can check themselves to see if they have been exposed to COVID prior to any symptoms. So no cough, no, before you get a fever, all those different things, you'd be able to tell if you were clear or not. And if clear, you can link it to your iPhone. And when you go to work, when you go to wherever it is that you're going, school, class, whatever it is, you can show people that in fact you've not been exposed. So that's step number two. And of course, the third thing is we got to develop a vaccine. And we've got 4 companies now that are in stage 2 of their trials. They're very optimistic. I've talked to a number of them, whether it's Pfizer, whether it's AstraZeneca, whether it's Johnson & Johnson. They are really buoyed by the early results in phase 1 and now beginning in phase 2, which starts for a lot of them this next month in July. And they're prepared to spend hundreds of millions, $1 billion, in fact, to start developing and producing that vaccine even before it's approved, believing that it's going to work, which is why in the hearing that we had last week, Dr. Tony Fauci, in answer to my question, really thought, it's not a certainty that we're going to have it before the end of the year, but in fact, the prediction that we'll have 100 million doses ready before the end of the year, hundreds of millions of doses early next year, because it very well could be approved. That's the page that we all want to be on. That's what we're looking for. And that's why it's so important now that we take the precautions that we can, washing your hands, wearing that mask, wherever you go. And I think that message is getting out there. And particularly now as we're seeing these states that are regressing, the numbers are going up, they didn't do that. And that's why there's going to be a pause, I think.
I apologize for that, but the computer has sort of gotten a little bit of a bug at this particular time, and I apologize for the interruption. No, that's all right. Everything is fine. But it does lead to a statement that was attributed to Dr. Fauci over the weekend. He's concerned that even if there is a vaccine, a lot of people aren't going to take it because of concerns about their own health. We've seen it with the flu vaccines, people saying, I'm not going to take it for religious reasons, or they think that it's going to give them even more problems and all that. It's one thing to have the vaccine, another thing to get people to take it.
Well, that's right. And there's not going to be a mandate. No one's going to be forced to take this. It's going to be voluntary. Believe me, the lines, I think, will be long. If the, a larger question that folks are asking, who's going to get it first? I mean, is it those over 60 years old? Is it those with some pre-existing illnesses like diabetes or, heart issues? I mean, whatever it might be. So that'll be the first question. But don't expect a mandate on this. I don't think you'll see that happen. But I do think that, as you think about vaccines, my bet is that the flu vaccine, and of course that's going to be different, when that comes out, usually the end of August, beginning of September, I'll bet the numbers spike in terms of people that are willing to take it. I still met people in March of this year who had not gotten the flu vaccine, and I encouraged them to do so because I said, you don't want to get the flu, a bad case of the flu, end up going to the hospital and being exposed. I mean, so do it now. And I hope they took my advice.
Let's hope so.
I know that.
Yeah, let's hope so. Let's hope so indeed. Before we talk a little bit more about the COVID-19 situation, a couple of legislative bills along the lines you were involved with, the next phase of the stimulus package, where are we standing on that? We've gotten a question. We haven't heard much about it. When is it coming? What's going to be about? How are we standing on this as we're getting towards the 4th?
Well, this will be a big week. We're going to see the unemployment numbers for June come out a little bit later this week, maybe a day earlier than normal because of the 4th of July, Friday being a federal holiday. But I would like to think things are going to improve. Maybe we have a little slight downtick on unemployment numbers, but I think that will probably set the stage for the next package. Congress, then I'll be home for 2 weeks before we go back. I fully expect that we'll see a package begin to move in the Senate. It's not going to be anything like the $3 trillion Pelosi package that she was able to pass on a partisan vote a few weeks ago. But I think you'll see money that's going to come for states, for cities, and for counties. And it'll be based on a formula, not politics, but a formula based on population, COVID cases, as well as the loss of revenue in this calendar year, making sure that nothing's going to be used to make up for past pension programs that are bankrupt, like in the state of Illinois and things like that. You're going to have some real restrictions there. But I think that'll be the package that'll start to move. It'll probably be announced in mid-July, so a couple of weeks. And I think that it'll be done before the August break, when we traditionally go home for the rest of the summer.
You're not expecting any more helicopter money coming to taxpayers in this regard?
No, better not be. It's not going to be everything including the kitchen sink, as we saw in the Pelosi bill. But I'll tell you one of the things that I think may be in there, and it's, again, doesn't need an appropriation bill, so won't count on the spending side. But I've been very active in trying to promote broadband and really get that deployed, particularly in rural areas. Had a discussion yesterday. It looks like we have bipartisan support in the Senate as well. We'd like to reintroduce our bill as early as tomorrow, perhaps. Get Republican and Democrat support. Again, it's bipartisan. But this would require the FCC, the Federal Communication Commission, to go ahead with an auction on the spectrum, and that those monies collected then would be able to go to the states based on need. Michigan, we'd get $1 billion over the next 10 years, over $100 million, and we'd start literally this fall, because as we look at where we are, particularly with COVID, those areas without that broadband connection, they are in real need. And I think we're tired of hearing the promises by the big guys. Oh yeah, it's going to be there. We need to get this thing done. We know that the private sector can do this, particularly the utilities, the electric companies. So this will be geared to them in all likelihood. But we could actually see construction on this as early as this fall if we get this thing done. And that well could be part of this package that the Senate begins to move likely in mid-July.
Two more things, Fred, and then we'll let you go. And we appreciate your time on WHTC. First of all, back to the COVID-19 situation. You drafted a letter to Governor Whitmer dealing with the seniors and putting COVID-19 patients in nursing homes. Governor might address that a little bit later on today, but certainly that's a situation that could have been handled a lot better.
Well, let's face it, as now as we begin to look back, knowing that we're still looking at the future, finding the right testing and a vaccine and where we need to go, we need to, maybe as many as a third, maybe even more, died in nursing homes. We need to find out why, particularly if the particular nursing home wasn't prepared to take somebody in that was diagnosed positive. And so those are the questions that need to be asked of all governors, of all states, to find out some answers. We try to do that. Doesn't look like we're going to get a lot of cooperation, but at some point, those answers need to be made, because as you look at perhaps a future pandemic, whatever it might be, we want to be as prepared as we can and not make the same mistakes that we made this round. That's for sure, particularly when it involves life and death.
The other thing was the Justice Bill. You were one of 3 GOP members who voted with the Democratic majority on it, catching some flack, unfortunately, for you from some of the conservative aspects of the Republican Party, but you felt that it was a measure that needed to be worked on.
Look, this is a step in the right direction. No bill is perfect. This has a pretty big flaw. I'm going to be working hard, and will continue to remove one provision that would involve what's called qualified immunity on law enforcement folks. Unless that's changed, we'll find it very difficult not only to retain but also to recruit new officers. That's got to change, and I'm convinced that it will. But at the same time, when you have when you're able to label lynching as a hate crime, when you're able to provide more money for body cams, and to me that's better accountability, but it also protects not only the officer, but also the person that might be engaged with that officer in terms of telling the truth versus someone that might have a cell phone across the street. When you look at more training, when you look at banning chokeholds, something that a lot has already been done in Michigan, and when you look at a national registry, again, Michigan has one statewide. But when you try to encourage other states to have a registry, so if an officer does have a particular history of trouble, that needs to be exposed so that he or she can't move from one job to the other. So it's a step in the right direction. Obviously, it needs to be fixed, this particular flaw. I'm convinced that it will be at whatever stage the bill moves forward to. But it was something I felt strongly about in terms of beginning to move the process forward, letting the legislators work this out, knowing that at the end of the day, that one onerous provision, and it is, needs to be removed, and I'm convinced that it will be.
He is Congressman Fred Upton. You hear him every Tuesday morning, or most Tuesday mornings during the year, talking about things going on in Washington. And Fred, as always, we appreciate your thoughts and appreciate the time you spend with us. If all goes well, we'll do this again next week, and have a safe and a blessed holiday, Fred.
You bet. It's going to be a little bit different not being in parades this year, but we'll still have a lot of family members in town, so it'll be fun.
Thank you very much. Fred Upton on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC.